And there are about, yeah, it depends on what study you look at, but she mentions there are about 13 to 15 million accredited investors in the US. So there's not a whole lot. I think there's more than that, but regardless, there's not a whole lot of people who are qualified as accredited investors. So as a company that is partnering with accredited investors, it's important to know who they are. And I think a lot of the times we go to the demographic information of accredited investors. They tend to be 45 year old plus. They live in business areas or business hubs like a New York City, a Dallas, a Miami, those types of MSAs versus a Prosper, Texas, or I don't know, some random area in Ohio, and the demographic information is important to know. What level of education do they have? Well, most of them have an undergraduate degree at minimum. So that's important to know. But I think where it gets really interesting is when we look at the psychographic information. And she is coming at it from, as I mentioned earlier, she's got 30 years of marketing experience at companies in New York City, and working with companies that have achieved some pretty tremendous things. I think she said she worked at Audible before. I think Amazon owns Audible now. So before Amazon purchased Audible, I believe that I might be misquoting something right there, but you get the idea. So with psychographic information, she said she took a look at their database, and she said they tend to be more progressive thinkers because syndications aren't something that most accredited investors know about. And quite frankly, a lot of accredited investors don't know the term accredited investor. And so they don't know what they have access to by being at a certain income level or certain net worth level. And one of the things to think about is when we talk about they tend to be a more progressive thinker. What does that mean? Well, it means that they tend to be more of an early adopter. So they are using Uber. They are, and again, I recognize that Uber isn't something that only early adopters are using, because a lot of people are using it now. But in the early days, they were one of the first ones using Uber, and they are more on the cutting edge of technology, or at least they try things out on the earlier stage relative to the general public. Now, anytime we're talking about 13 to 15 million people, anything you say about 13 million people will not apply to all 13 to 15 million people. So if you are an accredited investor and you're listening to this and you're like, I don't use Uber, or I'm not an early adopter, I get that. Just talking more in generality, because that's what Shoshana was talking about, is more general statements of them. Because I can tell you that from my experience, I haven't looked at this, so I don't have the exact statistic, but I'm going to estimate that 90% of our accredited investors own real estate besides partnering with us. So they are people who already have experience doing these types of deals, so they're more familiar with them and more comfortable with them. And the people who have not done any real estate outside of syndications, it's a much different conversation than if they've done deals, done some, even like a small investment property. So thinking about from a psychographic standpoint, how you position your company, knowing that They've likely done real estate deals in the past. They're likely a progressive thinker, most likely more of an early adopter. It helps you create more relevant information for the investors. And then what you can do with that, and I have not done that, our company has not done what I'm about to say, but in the future we will. What we can do with that is we can segment our email list so that, hey, if they have invested in the last 6 months, then there's a certain message. If they have never invested in real estate at all, then we know it's more of a long-term play with them, because we've got to educate them about syndication. So we segment our email list, or we put them in a certain segment in the email list where it's more of a education email series. Whereas if they've done multiple deals, multiple syndication deals, then it's a different track of segmentation. So we have certain different messaging for them. So it's just interesting to think about the different types of ways, or it's interesting to think about the different psychographic information and characteristics of investors, because then we can start segmenting our email list a certain way to really speak to each of the segments based on who they are and their experience or their thought process and their interests. And it's a more relevant message to them, which leads to more business for them and for us.